I was sitting in the brown leather chair at the lawyer's office, the kind where you can feel the grooves of every previous client pressing against your spine, when I noticed it. The statement on the table had numbers that didn't make sense. My college fund, supposed to be the one untouchable thing in my life, was short by thousands. I traced the digits with my finger, my chest tightening like a vice, and the room suddenly felt airless. Beside me, lounging like he owned the place, was my mother's partner, Greg. He wasn't legally my stepfather, but he had been around since I was 14, always orbiting our family decisions, always putting himself forward as my guardian. He tapped his pen on the polished oak table, casual, calm, until I glanced at him. That's when I saw it, the tiniest curl of a smirk, like the missing money was a private joke between him and the universe. I wanted to scream, but all I managed was a whisper. "These numbers are wrong." The lawyer looked up, adjusting his glasses, but it was Greg who answered first. No, the fund's just under review," he said smoothly, resting an arm behind my chair as though he was protecting me. His voice was like honey spiked with poison. "Markets fluctuate, kids get anxious." But I knew what I saw. My grandmother had left that money specifically for me before she passed. She'd been obsessive about it, telling me every time we drank tea together that I'd have the means to choose my own path. And now, staring at the cold, printed proof, I felt like her voice had been swallowed whole by lies and fine print. The lawyer cleared his throat, uneasy, probably sensing tension he hadn't signed up for, and shuffled the papers together as if order on the desk might bring order to the problem. I wanted to snatch them back, to keep staring, to demand every digit be explained, but my mother was waiting for me at home. And Greg, the man leaning so close that I could smell his cologne, already seemed to control the narrative. I walked out with my stomach in knots, but one thought repeating in my head like an alarm I couldn't silence. If the numbers are already different now, how much worse will they get if I stay quiet? And as terrified as I was, I also knew I would have to find out. Shall I write the next chapter? Walking out of that office, the late afternoon sun should have felt warm, but it only burned. I clutched the strap of my bag so tightly my fingers went white, replaying what I had just seen. That money wasn't a number on a page. It was my only ticket out. My grandmother had known what kind of household I'd grow up in after she was gone, and she'd made sure I would have some way to break away. Without that fund, college was impossible. And, without college, I was stuck in the small house where Greg's voice ruled every discussion, even when he wasn't technically supposed to have a say. The conflict twisted deeper because of my mother. She'd worked herself half-blind as a nurse, told me since I was small that she wanted me to have choices she never did. She believed in Greg more than she believed in herself sometimes. Every time I tried to expose his manipulations, his sudden control of the bills, his way of deciding which repairs were worth it, she accused me of being unfair. "He's just trying to help," she'd say, brushing off his intrusions like they were harmless. But college isn't harmless. College is years of my life, a debt trap if I didn't have that fund. My grandmother had written in her will that the money was mine, not hers, not my mom's, and certainly not Greg's. Yet there he was, managing it as though it were his private stock portfolio. I thought about walking away, giving up. I knew kids from my school who'd just gotten jobs at the mall when things fell through financially. But the image of my grandmother's face, the stubborn twist of her jaw when she left the account set up, kept shoving me forward. She had trusted someone would protect it. If it wasn't going to be my mom, then I had no choice. It had to be me. Back home, Greg was sprawled on the couch, flipping channels too fast to actually watch anything. He didn't look up when I walked in, though his voice slid over me like oil. Long day, kiddo? Don't worry your head about those papers. It's complicated stuff. I wanted to snap back, but my mother emerged from the kitchen holding a mug of coffee, her tired eyes flicking between us. Greg's good with numbers, sweetheart. He knows what he's doing. My teeth clenched, nearly grinding. She wanted so badly for this to be true that she couldn't see the terror written all over me. I swallowed my protest, but inside, I was already screaming. If my mother couldn't see it, I'd have to start paying closer attention myself. Because I had the sickening feeling that the missing money was only the beginning. And the first signs of it came sooner than I expected. Tiny cracks in everyday life that seemed too harmless to mean anything, until they lined up like warning flares. Shall I write the next chapter? The first crack was almost invisible. One morning, while walking past the front door, I noticed Greg snatch the mail before I could bend down to get it. He slid the envelopes under his arm, like a magician tucking away cards. "Nothing for you," he said smoothly, already moving toward their bedroom. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. But then it kept happening. Every day, he was waiting for the mailbox, like some guard dog that never left his post. When I asked about it, he offered an easy shrug. "Junk mail. Trust me, you don't want it." Then came the jokes. Over dinner one night, while my mom peeled open a plastic container of leftover chicken, Greg looked at me and grinned. "Have you seen tuition prices lately? They should pay you for suffering through it, not the other way around." Mom chuckled weakly, but I saw the glance he threw at her when she wouldn't meet his eyes. My stomach coiled tightly. Another time he held up his phone, pretending to scroll through an article. "Half of these kids graduate with debt they never crawl out of. You sure college is worth it?" The question was meant half serious, half sarcastic, but it stabbed too close. Was he planting seeds? Was he preparing my mom for something he had already done? By the time summer rolled around, Greg had made himself the gatekeeper of everything. Bills, accounts, even car expenses. He insisted it took stress off my mother, and she, exhausted from 12-hour shifts on her feet, let him. I recognized the pattern too late. First, slip into help. Then, become the authority. Finally, erase any chance of someone questioning him. One night, unable to sleep, I walked to the kitchen for water and noticed the laptop glowing faintly on the table. Greg's personal account was open. I didn't dare snoop, but even the layout, the neat columns of transactions, the same banking interface that tied into my fund, made my chest tighten. There was a connection there. I just couldn't prove it yet. But then he noticed me watching him the next day. He came up behind me casually and said, in this honey-slick voice, "You trust me, don't you? I'd never let anything happen to that fund. You should relax. Stress isn't good for kids your age." He patted my shoulder like I was 5. I wanted to spit in his face, but instead, I smiled. A cold, tiny smile that hurt my cheeks. Because in that moment, I realized something important. He wanted me off balance. He wanted me to question my own instincts. The war hadn't erupted yet, but the battlefield was already drawn, and I was standing alone on one side of it. Still, I thought if I confronted him directly, maybe he'd back down. I couldn't have been more wrong. Shall I write the next chapter? So I finally asked him. It was after dinner. The plates still sticky with the sauce my mother had hurried together before collapsing upstairs for an early shift. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Greg sat across from me, swirling the last bit of beer in his glass, staring at the bubbles instead of my face. I took a breath and just said it. "You used the money, didn't you? The college fund's missing. I saw the statement." He laughed. Not loud, not angry, just that low, mocking laugh that made my skin prickle. "God, you kids," he said, leaning back. "Always jumping to conclusions. Banks screw up paperwork all the time. Numbers move around. You don't understand how complicated it is. I'm not a little kid anymore, I shot back. Grandma left that money for me, not for you. It doesn't move around by itself. That's when his eyes sharpened, the mask slipping just enough for me to see what was underneath. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice dropping softer, sharper. You think you're so grown up, huh? Let me explain something. That account is tied up with family responsibilities now. Your mom and I make sure everything's safe. Because frankly, you're not going to college without us. Not unless you want to take out loans you'll never pay back. His words hit me like a slap. He was rewriting the truth in real time, twisting it into something that sounded almost reasonable. My heart pounded, but I kept staring. Because if I looked away, he'd win. So what? You're saying I should just trust you? I whispered. That's exactly what I'm saying, he replied, leaning back again, smug. You want to stress your mother out with this nonsense? Make her worry about your paranoia? Or do you want her to keep believing in you, in us? It was a clean trap. If I argued, I looked selfish, jealous, dramatic. If I stayed quiet, he buried the truth further. I felt like the floor under me was sand, and he was pushing 1 foot harder with every sentence. Later that night, when I tried hinting to my mom about the missing funds, she shook her head. He wouldn't lie about this. Don't start fights where there aren't any. She kissed my cheek, and the weight of her trust in him pressed down harder than anything. I shut myself in my room with my fists aching from being clenched so long. If I wasn't careful, he'd paint me as unstable completely. I could already hear the lines he'd use. Paranoid, ungrateful, dramatic. But the universe has a cruel way of forcing truths into the open. And it happened for me at the most public, humiliating moment possible. Shall I write the next chapter? It happened at the notary's office, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look faintly sick. My mother had asked me to come because Greg insisted we should update some family paperwork. I thought it might be about the mortgage, maybe even insurance. I never expected what came out of his mouth. The notary greeted us warmly, flipping through a manila folder. Greg sat taller than usual, his shoulders rolling back like he owned the place. And before anyone asked a question, he announced it as if it were a done deal. We're restructuring the college fund, moving it into a better performing account in my name for easier management. For half a second, the room went silent. The notary hesitated, pen hovering midair. My mother blinked at him in confusion, then looked toward me, waiting for me to smile, nod, say something that made it sound like this wasn't insane. But my jaw dropped. What are you talking about? My voice cracked, sharp against the hush of the office. That money isn't yours. It doesn't need restructuring. It's supposed to be left for me, untouched. Greg acted amused, almost indulgent. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing just enough to make a point. She's nervous, he told the notary. She doesn't really understand investments. Kids don't. I shoved his hand off me, my face pulsating hot. Stop talking for me. My voice ricocheted off the bland beige walls, startling even the receptionist at the front desk. My mother winced, pressed low in her chair, whispering for me to calm down. But he continued, his tone gaining that authoritative edge he used whenever he wanted to box me into silence. Look, the market's brutal right now. I'm protecting her future. This is what responsible guardians do, isn't it? We don't just let her waste it all on tuition when it could grow. The notary cleared his throat nervously, glancing between us. If the fund is in her name, she should be the primary consultant on changes. Greg cut him off. We manage things collectively. Isn't that right? He looked hard at my mother, holding her hostage with his gaze. I caught her expression, hesitant, guilty, but she gave him exactly what he needed. She nodded once, small, defeated. In that moment, I felt the free fall. Nobody stood up for me. Nobody said, wait. It was Greg's show, and I was cast as the ungrateful kid disrupting his perfect plan. But I swore, sitting there with that suffocating weight pinning me down, that I would not let him finish this performance. Not with my grandmother's money. Not with my future. I tried to get private time with the notary later, to explain, but Greg shadowed me like a warden, intercepting every step. Every reasonable path I tried was blocked. He had my mother's loyalty. He had her exhaustion. And he had all the confidence of a man who thought there'd never be consequences. I left the office with my heart splintered but my mind more focused than ever. If he was going this far publicly, then somewhere, hidden in the shadows, there had to be proof. And proof has a funny way of arriving when you least expect it. Sometimes right there in the glow of your phone at midnight. Shall I write the next chapter? It happened 2 nights later. I was lying in bed, phone face down on my chest, drowning in the frustration of another tense dinner where Greg had dismissed me with smirks, and my mother had begged me not to start things. My eyes burned from holding back so many words. And that's when it lit up. My phone buzzed with a bank notification that wasn't even supposed to come to me. It took me a second to process. A withdrawal alert, 4 figures, from my college fund. The account was tied to my grandmother's setup, so technically I was listed on the statements. Greg must have forgotten, or maybe my grandmother's paperwork was more ironclad than he realized. But there it was, glowing on the screen like evidence hand-delivered to me. I sat up so fast I nearly lost my breath. At first, I thought maybe I was misreading it. But the account number matched. The balance dropped, clear as day. Even worse, the destination was obvious. A creditor's account. My grandmother's carefully saved money had been siphoned off to pay Greg's personal debt. For a solid 5 minutes, I just stared, fists trembling, hearing his voice in my head. Banks make mistakes all the time. Kids don't understand investments. Lies. All of it. He'd been bleeding the fund right under our noses, hiding it in the fine print, convincing my mom it was management. I couldn't sit still. I printed the statement using the old clunky printer in our hallway that groaned with each page. Every screech of the machine felt like it might wake the house, so I stuffed a towel against the door to muffle the sound. When the sheet finally slid out, ink still damp, I held it like a weapon. Proof. Paper that couldn't be gaslit away. But fear hit next. If I showed my mom, would she believe me? Or would Greg smooth talk over it, weaving another story that I was just reading it wrong? I carried the paper back into my room, shutting the door silently and pressing it under a stack of notebooks. My heart thrashed painfully. I wanted to storm into the living room and slam it against his chest, but I knew if I wasted this, if I blew up without a plan, he'd bury it again. So I decided. I would wait for the right day, the right audience, a moment where Greg couldn't laugh it off or shove it under the rug. I had to be strategic, not just angry. And as I lay there with the printed sheet burning like hot metal against my thigh, I realized something else. If I didn't confront this head on, the man who wasn't even my legal stepfather was about to erase the only lifeline I had for my future. That clarity was terrifying. But it was also freeing, because for the first time, I knew what I had to do next. And I also knew the showdown was coming, and there would be no going back from it. Shall I write the next chapter? The next morning, I couldn't sit across from him at breakfast without feeling the weight of that paper burning inside my bag. He leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee like a man with no secrets, while my mother scrolled through her phone, half asleep before another 12-hour shift. The smell of burnt toast turned my stomach. I kept rehearsing in my head. Show her the paper, show her the truth. But I froze. I knew if it came to me versus him, she'd choose him. Again. So instead, I made a different choice. I decided I wouldn't go after him with whispers in the kitchen or accusations over dinner. If I was going to bring this out, it needed to happen in a place where he couldn't spin, where someone neutral could confirm what he'd done. The notary. The very same office where he'd humiliated me before. That would be my battlefield. For 2 days, I hid the statement in the lining of my backpack, so paranoid I barely slept. Anytime Greg walked into my room without knocking, which he did constantly, I pictured him finding it, ripping it up, calling me delusional. But he never checked. He thought he had me caged, silenced. That arrogance was the only reason I still had my chance. Then the moment came. Another family paperwork meeting at the notary's office, scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Greg told me in that condescending sigh of his, "You'll come too, of course. It's good practice for you to see how grown-ups handle things." I nodded, forcing a sweetness that made the back of my throat ache. He didn't suspect a thing. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror with the paper folded inside a file folder, my hands shaking so badly I could barely tie my own shoes. I whispered to myself, "This is it. You either prove it now, or you lose everything." At the office, we sat down in the same stiff chairs as before. The air carried that sterile, dusty paper smell, the smell of formalities and locked drawers. My mother seemed tense, her brow wrinkling as the notary arranged the documents. Greg smiled wide, unusually talkative, filling the silence with anecdotes about smart investments. And then I did it. I pulled the folded sheet from my folder, flattened it carefully on the polished desk, and looked straight at the notary first. Not Greg. Not my mother. "Before we discuss anything else," I said, my voice trembling but loud, "can you explain why my college fund is being used to pay down a creditor account under his name?" The silence shattered the room. My mother's eyes darted down at the paper. The notary blinked, leaned forward, adjusted his glasses. Greg's smile faltered, the corners twitching like a mask slipping. And in that split second, I knew. I had finally turned the tables. But what would happen next would be far worse, and far louder, than even I had prepared for. Shall I write the next chapter? Greg's chair screeched across the tile as he shot upright, his face flushed crimson. For the first time, his calm, collected charm cracked wide open. "Where did you get that?" he barked, stabbing a finger at the paper like it was contraband. The notary slowly adjusted his glasses, scanning the document I had printed, his brows furrowed in that heavy, deliberate way that made silence more damning than words. My heart hammered in my chest like I had just sprinted across the city, but I forced myself to keep my chin up. "I get the notifications too," I said flatly. "You didn't cover your tracks as well as you thought you did." My mother's eyes were darting between us like a trapped bird. "Greg?" Her voice cracked, thin and desperate. "Please, tell me this isn't what it looks like." He gave a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it, just rage and arrogance colliding. "You don't understand. None of you understand. That money was sitting there, wasting away. I took a portion, temporarily, to manage some obligations. It's for the family's stability. Everything I do is for us." "For us?" I snapped. My voice rose into the stale air, sharp and undeniable. "You drained my grandmother's gift to cover your debts. I'm the only one who loses. Don't twist this into some noble sacrifice." The notary coughed lightly, looking at my mother. "This account is not his to manage," he said evenly. "The way these funds are structured, withdrawals like this could, legally, be considered misappropriation." He carefully avoided the harsher word, theft. but I saw the weight of it in his eyes. Greg turned on me then, his mask completely gone. The softness, the calm, all of it stripped away. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To humiliate me in front of everyone? You're ungrateful. I've kept this roof over your head, and this is how you repay me?" Something in my chest snapped. All the nights he had shadowed me, all the times my mother dismissed my warnings because she was too tired to argue. The weight of it erupted. My grandmother kept a roof over my head by thinking ahead, by protecting me from exactly this kind of manipulation. You stood in her shadow and pretended to be something you're not. You think you're family? You're just a parasite feeding off it. My mother gasped, tears brimming. Greg tried to speak again, but the notary held up a hand, sharp as a blade. "I suggest we pause here. Until resolved, this account will be locked to prevent further withdrawals." For the first time, I saw panic ripple through Greg's expression. He was losing control, and he knew it. But little did I realize, losing control in that office was one thing. What came afterward, the fallout in our home, would turn every dinner, every silence, every room in our house into a battlefield. Shall I write the next chapter? That night was unbearable. The car ride home was silent, except for the faint rattle of the air conditioner. My mother sat in the passenger seat, staring out her window as if the streetlights might give her answers. Greg's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the muscles in his jaw ticking over and over. I kept the printed bank slip clutched in my lap like armor, even though I knew it wouldn't save me when the door of our house closed behind us. The minute we stepped inside, he exploded. He threw his keys on the counter so hard they ricocheted into the sink. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Going behind my back to the notary, embarrassing me, undermining me like that?" His voice shook the walls, rattling the frames of family pictures that suddenly felt like cheap props in a set. I didn't even flinch. I was past fear now. "What you did was theft. Don't try to make me the criminal for showing the truth." My mother jumped between us, her hands raised like she was refereeing a fight she didn't understand. "Stop, both of you, just stop." Her voice cracked, thick with tears. She looked at Greg first, her loyalty trembling, breaking, but when her eyes flicked back to me, I saw the doubt still winning. She desperately wanted to believe he was just flawed, but well-intentioned. Greg seized on it instantly, turning his fury into wounded charm. "Don't you see what she's doing? She's trying to split us apart, over money. She doesn't respect me. She doesn't respect you. She's a selfish little girl playing victim because she can't handle a bit of reality." And my mother? She didn't say a word. Not against him, not for me. Her silence was the loudest weapon in that room. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd won again, bending her perception with fear and guilt like he always did. My chest ached, but I forced myself to stand tall. "No, not this time. You can scream all you want, but the notary locked the account. You can't touch it anymore, and if you try, I'll take it straight to the bank and the police." He froze. The mask didn't slip this time. No, it shattered completely. His face contorted with something primal, something that made me realize how dangerous cornered men become. He took a step toward me, and for the first time, I thought he might actually hurt me. But then my mother stepped in front of me. Her shoulders were trembling, her voice small but steady. "Don't." For that 1 second, I saw in her eyes the woman who raised me, the woman who once thought freedom mattered more than appearances. Greg backed off, hissing through his teeth like an animal. He stormed toward the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. My mother sat down at the kitchen table, covering her face with both hands. Her silence was different this time. Not obedient, broken. I stood there, trying not to cry, clutching the proof in my hand so tight it crumpled. The war wasn't over, but finally, the balance had shifted, and with Greg exposed and desperate, I knew the fallout wouldn't just bruise the walls of our house. It would rip apart the entire foundation of who we were as a family. Shall I write the next chapter? The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, Greg had already twisted the story into something grotesque. I came downstairs and found him at the kitchen table with my mother, papers spread out, his voice calm again, his hand resting over hers like they were some united front against me. He was spinning it as an investment mishap, just a temporary transfer that had already been remedied. Like a magician performing a trick, he acted as if the screaming match the night before never happened. "You see, sweetheart," he said, looking at her with those practiced puppy dog eyes, "if she had just come to me instead of running to the notary and humiliating us, none of this would be a problem. But I know she's scared. We need to forgive her, not punish her." I nearly dropped my mug of coffee. He was turning Kamei into the reckless one, the child who overreacted, while he sat there cloaked in calm benevolence. My mother was nodding, tight-lipped, as if she didn't fully believe him, but also didn't have the energy to fight. I slammed the crumpled paper down on the table. "Stop lying. That withdrawal didn't get reversed. It went straight to your creditors, and you haven't paid it back. You didn't just manage the account, Greg. You stole from me." His smile didn't break, but his eyes burned holes into me. "Be careful with your words," he said softly, dangerously. The room buzzed with silence. My mother looked one way, then the other, torn like a rope being pulled in two directions. Then, with a trembling voice, she said, Maybe we should get outside help, someone neutral. Let the bank explain it properly." That was it, the first crack in her loyalty to him. Greg's hand twitched on the table, knuckles whitening. He saw it too. He leaned back and scoffed. "You want to let outsiders meddle in our finances? You want them poking around, judging us like some charity case?" His words dripped with contempt, the defensive desperation of a man pulling every lever to make her fear losing face. But my mother didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt the slow, beautiful shift, the weight tipping onto my side. She was doubting him. She just needed the final push. Later that day, while Greg stormed out pretending to run errands, I pulled out my phone and showed her the notification log. Every time he touched my account, every transfer. I showed her how the destination repeated, creditor accounts, not investments. By the time she finished scrolling, her hands were clamped over her mouth, her whole body shaking. "How could he?" she choked. "After everything I trusted him with." I didn't say I told you so. I didn't gloat. I only whispered the truth, because he thought he could always convince you I was the problem. Tears blurred her eyes. But those tears weren't for me this time. They were for the years she had let herself be blind. And she looked at me with something new, something raw. "We have to confront him together." I nodded, clutching her hand. The breaking point was here. And I knew the next time Greg tried to spin his story, he wouldn't just be facing me anymore. He'd be facing the both of us. Shall I write the next chapter? When Greg came home that night, he walked through the door whistling, carrying a six-pack under one arm like nothing had changed. But the moment he saw both of us sitting at the kitchen table, side by side, his smile faltered. He smelled the ambush. My mother's hands were trembling on her lap, but her voice held when she spoke first. "Greg, we need to talk about the fund. No more stories, no more mismanagement. I saw the transfers." For the first time, she wasn't asking. She was telling. His eyes flicked to me, cold and venomous. "So she's poisoned you too. Congratulations." He dropped the beer on the counter hard enough to dent it. "You're buying into her paranoia just like I said you would." This isn't paranoia, I cut in, pulling out the stack of notifications I'd printed that afternoon. Every withdrawal, every date, every creditor. I slid them across the table. This is proof. You've been bleeding the account for months. He snatched the papers like he was about to shred them, but froze mid-gesture with both our eyes locked on him. His face contorted into something ugly, a blend of fury and panic. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, he snapped, slamming the documents back down. I've been carrying debts you don't even know about, for this family. Do you think your mom's salary covers everything? Do you think keeping this house afloat is free? I did what I had to do. The words came out in jagged bursts, but for the first time, they didn't land. Not on me, and, most importantly, not on my mother. She straightened slowly, the tears in her eyes replaced by something sharper. Disappointment, betrayal. You didn't do this for us, she said quietly. You did it for yourself, and you lied to me every step of the way. You made me doubt my own daughter. Her voice cracked, but it was steady enough to make his face drain of color. He tried again, softer now, desperate. Baby, listen. I can fix this. We can fix this. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to admit it. That money, it was just sitting there. But my mother cut him off, something she hadn't done in years. It wasn't yours to touch. The silence after those 5 words felt like the moment between thunder and lightning, charged and terrifying. Greg looked at me then, his glare full of all the venom he could no longer spit at her. You think you've won, he whispered, voice low and dangerous. But you don't know what happens when you make enemies at home. A chill ran through me, but I didn't flinch, because this wasn't just me anymore. My mother had finally stepped onto my side of the line, and together, we had him cornered. But cornered animals don't back down. They lash out, and Greg wasn't finished lashing out yet. Shall I write the next chapter?